welcome everyone. We'll get started. Just as a first thing, hi, I'm Emily Peck. I'm Executive Director of Clay Art Center. So yeah, welcome. I'm just going to say a few words. Obviously, this is for Clay Art Center. We're really excited to have you here with Zoey Scheler, who's going to do a demo of her cup, and we're going to raffle off one at the end for one person who is there, still at the end of the session. Clay Art Center is located in Port Chester, New York. We're about 20 miles north of New York City. We're a ceramic art center with adult and youth classes, community arts programs, artist studio spaces, artist residencies, of which Zoey is a former artist in residence, exhibition space, and a shop. And so this is a little picture of the outside of our building. And then this is Zoey. We're very excited to have her here. I can let her do a little bit of an intro about herself when she starts talking. And as I said, she is a former artist in resident, and now that we do a lot of virtual classes, she's been also a teacher with Clay Art Center for this last year. So it's been lots of fun to be able to work with her, even if she is not local. So let me stop sharing and turn this over to Zoey.
Awesome.
And oh, one last thing I will say is if you put it into speaker view, it's going to be the best way to watch this. So that way Zoey will be the main screen. So Zoey, if you want to get started.
All right. Well, hi everyone. I'm so excited that you guys are here with me today. I feel really honored to still be able to be a part of Clay Art Center. Sorry, I can't see myself. Hold on. So it's a little, 1 second. All right.
We see you just fine. We can see you just perfectly.
Okay, and that's all that matters. So I'm just super excited to be here with you guys today. I'm going to be showing you the process of making one of these mugs that you can see here, and the lucky winner will get the mug that I'm making today with you guys if everything goes according to plan. Obviously with ceramics and kilns, things go a little wild, and you just want to be safe. So just in case, if things don't go right, you guys will get this mug right here. So today what I wanted to do is basically go through a bunch of my different processes. So I'm not going to necessarily finish this mug with you all, but I want to get as much information of what I do to you guys. So I'm really excited to share as much as I can with you. Basically, since being at Clay Art Center, which it's now been almost 2 years, I've been living in Cañon City, Colorado. So my work has shifted a little bit, I would say. I've always been very into color and playful objects and the like, but my space and the place that I am and my surroundings really started to influence me. And I just wanted to be able to share the beauty that I see every day with my viewers and share sort of this joy and happiness. You know, life is challenging, it's been a crazy year. So my thought was, if I'm making things and putting things out in the world, I might as well add a little joy and happiness. So that's sort of my goal with my work always. And then the other thing I just want to say before I get started is that I love when I teach to have a dialogue going on. So feel free to unmute yourself at any point and ask me a question as I'm going. I'm going to try and move closer to the screen to kind of show you close-up shots of things. So if you don't see something or if you misheard me, feel free to unmute yourself and ask me, or simply type in a question and Emily will sort of say that for me. All right, so let's get started. First off, clay I'm using. I feel like people always really like to know what kind of clay. I am for my teaching and for when I'm experimenting with my work, which this cup was sort of an experiment for this demo, and I'm really excited with how it came out, and I'm definitely going to be making more of them. I'm working with a stoneware that's actually half porcelain, half stoneware. It's a Laguna clay. It is called half and half. Pretty easy to remember. And what I like about it is it gets pretty white. It's a creamier white, but it has some grog in it. So it allows me to sort of push and play with the clay and be a little more hard and rough and kind of test things, push the boundaries of clay in a way that I don't feel like I can always do with porcelain, which most of my work is made with. So any work that you see in the shop with Clay Art Center, and I'll show you a few pieces, all of that is porcelain. And for the reason I choose not to use porcelain when I'm demoing is that I want to be able to really show you everything and kind of not worry that I'm letting my handle dry too long or things start to crack and that sort of thing. So first thing first, when I'm making this work, I throw the mug on the wheel and then I attach a handle, wrap it up, let it kind of all get together. That's how I work with all of my clay. I think it's really important. This is something I feel with anytime you're making mugs. Once you attach a handle, don't touch it. You want to add, carve, decorate, do all these things, don't touch it for a little while. I wrap it, I put it in plastic, I put a Post-it note on it that says, literally, don't touch it. I put a Post-it so it's a reminder to me not to touch those mugs. And I have found that I then don't deal with handles cracking and I don't deal with sort of a lot of the stress that I found, stress cracks and little things that I found that would happen with my thrown work and things that I was attaching other things don't happen. So patience with ceramics is huge. So I let it sort of set up and then it's time for me to decorate. So you can see on here, I've got my moon and sun sort of placed on there and I've got some of my grass started. And for this, the clay is I would say pre-leather hard. It still has some softness to it. So when I'm scratching and attaching, some slip is being produced. So when I'm doing that, I'm really only using a little bit of water. And I'll show you guys that sun and moon is just a tiny little pinch pot. Tiny little pinch pot, nothing too crazy about that. I just got them attached so that I could go to the next part of decorating them next. The grass on here, I use my handy dandy little tiny extruder. Now this walnut hollow extruder that you can get on Amazon is not the most high-end device. And after years of using it, it no longer cranks like it's supposed to. So I actually just have to like push it on the tabletop to get my noodles to come out. So it's a little silly when it's happening, but it works great and I love it. And it comes with a lot of different dyes that you can use. So I can get really skinny noodles, thicker noodles, single, coil, I can get squares, all sorts of different shapes. So I love it. And basically what I do to apply the applique noodles or my grass or bushes or weeds or whatever your imagination might tell you it is, I am simply using my extruder, and because it doesn't work properly, I have to push it on the tabletop, and these noodles come out, just like that. And then I'm using these noodles, and I'm just sort of playing with them in my hand, kind of positioning them, smushing them, doing all sorts of things. Sometimes I cut them so it looks like fresh cut grass, depending on what look I'm going for. And what I've done on the surface of my pot is I've scratched the surface. I've scratched it up. And as I'm applying the noodles, I am kind of just misting a little my piece. I'm not worrying about scratching and attaching every noodle. I know that because I'm attaching these noodles that I just extruded to more noodles that were just extruded, and then I kind of press and play with the position, that they're all then gonna have time to dry and sort of form together. And I'm not worried that they're gonna separate. I just apply a little pressure down at the bottom, making sure that they're sort of hugging the piece, and I work my way around the form. You can see that I have areas down there where it's scratched and ready for more noodles. What I often do is midway through doing this, when I get a nice layer of my first layer of grass on there, I like to go in and switch out the dye that I have to have finer noodles. So I'm always thinking sort of when I'm building these landscapes with the idea of foreground, middle ground, background. So like my littler grass are gonna be in the front. As it goes back, things change. I'm always playing sort of with the surface of things so that you're getting some sense of space, some sense of depth. That's why I like sort of adding these three-dimensional elements to a mug. There's something playful about that. And it's giving you sort of more of a sense of an actual space. So I would come in, you just pop this little guy out of there. I'm gonna switch it up for a small little die, and it just screws right on. And what I like about this is that it's not hard to clean up. It's little, I can bring it wherever I want. If I forget that I had clay in there and I let it get hard, it's not a lot of clay that I've wasted. I just like have to get it out of there. I just like it, it's a really great tool. So you'll see now, as I continue to go around, these will be smaller noodles. So I'm gonna just simply press.
Zoe, somebody's asking what you fire at.
So great question. I bisque all of my work. So you can see the noodles are a little bit finer. I bisque all of my work to cone 04, always have. That's like what my high school teacher did. And then, just gonna spray it a little more, and then I fire to cone 5. And I do between a 7 and 10 minute hold on my kiln. And by doing that, I'm getting somewhere closer to like 5.5. It's somewhere in there. And I just find that I'm not ever dealing with anything running. My colors are always consistent to the way I use all Amico velvet underglazes for the most part, some speedball underglazes as well. And I find that the colors remain really vibrant and consistent to the way I like them. I use all commercial materials. The glazes are rated for cone 5, 6. I've found that somewhere in the middle works for me. So that's the temperature that I primarily work with. I'm not going to continue adding all the noodles because you don't need to watch me add a million noodles, but I would continue to go around and layer this up, always making sure to spray it a little bit because I want there to be moisture for those grass little noodles to connect to. Then my next move for this mug is that I would want to wax my surface because I really like when I do inlay work to have a wax surface for a few reasons. One, I find that the edges of where I cut through the clay have smoother edges for when the piece is finished. It doesn't kind of have those rough, sharp little parts or little areas that are a little more jagged. And I find that I'm using less underglaze because the wax resists that underglaze, so I'm able to use less material. So I'm gonna get out my wax, and I like to use standard wax. I have that here, and I add food coloring to it, thanks to Don, who's in the audience. He showed me that one. I like to add it so that I can see it on my work. It comes clear, so it's hard to know if you've brushed everywhere. So adding some food coloring, it burns away in the kiln. It works great. And then I always like to have a specific brush for wax. Even though wax washes off with like soap and warm water, I always like to have a brush that's designated for it. So I don't have to worry that if I like go into an underglaze with the brush, what if it had a little wax and wax is in there, like contamination. So that was nice, a little dance action. I'm going to apply a little wax, and I'm again not going to do the whole thing, but I'm going to show you guys. And for this, it doesn't matter where I get it. I'm going to wax. I'm waxing over my moon or my sun, whichever that might end up being. And I'm just waxing, and you can see it goes on. I just need a thin coat on the surface. It's no issue if I get some on the noodles. It's going to burn away. I'm not worried that I'm being too neat about it. If I knock a noodle off, no problem. And I'm just waxing, getting this nice and coated. And you guys can see that because it's blue, I'm able to see where I might have missed a spot. A little chunk. And I have waxed my form. And what I like about this standard wax is it dries really quickly. So for our sake, I don't want you guys to like wait a whole long time. It's nice. It'll be dry in a few minutes and able for me to carve. And what I like to do is that's sort of my place to play and decide what is this landscape going to look like. Am I actually looking at my window at some mountains and trying to reference that, which I'm very lucky to be able to do? Or am I thinking about a space I've been before? Am I just simply going for making up my own sort of animated landscape? This is sort of where all of that play happens and where this, what right now looks like, I don't even know, an egg and some like spaghetti. We're going to transform this into a sun, a moon, stars, rainbows, clouds, all of those things. So that's where the mug sort of comes to life. I'm going to put this in some water so it doesn't dry out and close this up. And then we're going to start carving and doing some of the detail work. So a few of the things I want to show you guys is how I add the details, like the mug lines and the drawing, the clouds and all that, but also the fun textures I use for the moon, the stars, you can see, or snow, depending on what you want it to be. And then also the texture I do for the sun. I've always been to texture. You can see that in all of my work, that's something really important to me, and sort of playing with the layers of depth you can get with all sorts of textures. So that's what we're going to do on here. So wax, dry to the touch. You basically just don't want it to be sticky anymore. And I'm going to come in with my favorite carving tool, ever, if I can find it. Yes. And it is the WS Kemper carving tool. Sorry, I was covering the tip. It's a tiny, tiny, tiny little wire tip. What I love about it is it works really great to carve thin or thick lines. And you can actually pinch the tip with a little plier if you want to get an even finer line. So I have a few where I pinched it a little, and then I have a few that I just have as they were bought. And I love that you can play with the line. And this is where I will come in and I will carve some mountains, and I'll sort of lay out the scene. So I'm going to do that, and I'm just going to do a couple of little marks, because the other great thing is, even though I'm kind of doing this demo speed version, because 30 minutes isn't a lot of time, I'll be able to go back and wax the other side, go back in and carve more if there's more that I want to add later. Like, this doesn't, even though I'm doing all the steps right now, I can go back and add and enhance and do all sorts of things once we're not on the Zoom anymore. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to start with carving some mountains. This is a little hard to show you guys as I'm doing, but I'm going to do my best. And it carves really beautifully right through that line. So that's sort of my first row of mountains that I would have go around the entire object, and then come back for sort of my second layer. And this is just allowing me to lay out my landscape, lay out my image. And I've got my second round of mountains. I can go in and add my snow. I know that I'm going to be adding these berries to the side, and I like the idea of having ones that are drawn and flat and then ones that are floating and suspended in space, and we're going to talk about that too. So I want to make sure I put in a few little gestures for that. And I'll do one more. And then I'm going to move up close to show you some of the tools I use for the moon and for things like that. So you can see I've got a couple of my little berries drawn on there. I got my mountain lines, more to be added for sure, but I've got it started. And for our moon and the sun, I use all sorts of different tools. And I'm going to move close to the screen so you guys can see them all. And so we got needle tool to make all my sorts of little crazy dots that I do like a crazy person. We have the XIEM tools that have these tiny little stylus balls, big and small, that I love. And then if you don't want to get them from a ceramic tool, they also make fondant tools for cake decorating that have these tiny little balls on the end that work really great for texture. And then I have these pipes, these brass pipes that are all at different circle sizes that I use for the snow and stars and imprints in the moon and all those to really develop that surface. And it takes just a little touch to do that, which is so nice. So I'm going to show you guys with some of these tools. I can come in and really start playing with developing the surface of this moon. So that's just one tool there. And then I can flip it over, and the other side's even bigger. And I can go in and do some more dots, giving this variation. I can come in with my needle tool and stipple. And you might even be able to see that I leave the clay on the moon and the sun to like have little cracks in the surface, because it's nature, and why not? Why not do that?
Zoe, there's a question about where you get your brass pipes from.
Right, so this was a hard find because I had one of them and I didn't know where to get it. I literally Googled on Amazon skinny brass pipes or skinny copper pipes, and it came in a pack. I have no idea what they're actually for, but they weren't very expensive, and you can cut them if you wanted to make more of them. They work great. But I also took Andrea Dennison's workshop yesterday through NCECA. So those of you that are registered with NCECA, you should totally check it out. And she told me that to get little circles, I love this. She uses tips to the little squirt bottles, to like slip trailing bottles, because that's a perfect circle too. So there's lots of ways to get a little perfect circle indent, which is very satisfying. And I know why you would want to know where that tool is from, because I love them. So
and then can you also talk about what the wax does again?
So yes, and I will show you guys that in a second. The wax is going to act as a resist for me, and I'm going to get to that step so it'll make more sense as to why I waxed it. But one of the main reasons is these little edges here, if I didn't wax, would have kind of little boogers, for lack of a better word, and sharp edges that I try to avoid because I want my cup to be handled and held. So the wax kind of softens that when my tool carves through, which I really appreciate for being able to handle the work. And let me just show you
quickly, and just say Granger Supply is a tool company and supply company that sells all different size brass and copper rods.
Awesome. Thank you, Lee. Love it. That's awesome. So I'm going to take this tool and I'm just going to show you how I get these nice little perfect circles. And I'll do one on the moon. And it gives me these perfect little circles that I then can fill with underglaze later. And it acts like a barrier for me. So I'm not having to like have a super steady hand and be perfect at filling in this tiny circle. That little edge, that little indent that was created acts as a little wall for me to then fill with underglaze later, which is great. So what I want to show you now is that inlay, how I get the black outline of my drawing that makes it then like a coloring book. That's the idea, is that I'm creating my outlines, goes in for the firing, for the bisque firing, comes back out, and then I get to color it in. Totally like a coloring book. Playing with watercolors is what it feels like. It's really fun. But I like to get that inlay done now so those black lines are there. So this is some jet black underglaze that I have, and I've mixed it with a little bit of water because I like it to be a thinner consistency. And I just always have a jar of it because I use it so often. And I find that like sometimes the water and the underglaze separate a little. I just shake it well before I use it, and I haven't had any sort of issue. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to, I use inexpensive brushes, nothing fancy. I buy packs, like kids packs, so that I don't have to worry about them if they get a little cruddy. Nothing special. And I'm going to come in with this underglaze, this thin underglaze. And when I apply it, you're going to see that it's going to kind of bead around the places that I'm applying it because of that wax. And I'm filling in, trying to hit all the places I carved. Normally the whole mug would be carved. So I would come in and do this to the whole mug. And I normally like to let this set out into just like till it's not so shiny and wet. So right now on the surface, you can see it's beading, it's resisting, it's really only filling in those grooves. I want sort of where this underglaze is still really wet, I normally like for it to have a little time to dry. And that can take, depending on your atmosphere, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, kind of anywhere in between, sometimes a little longer. And then I go ahead with a sponge and clean water, which I don't really have over here, but that's okay. Get my damp sponge. And normally, like I said, I've let it dry, but for our sake, I'm going to go ahead and wipe. And I'm going to wipe this underglaze so you can see that I'm getting these crisp lines. See that little circle that's filled in? Love that. And I would be washing my sponge in between every time and wiping till all of that was gone. And then my mug is basically like ready to start drying slowly, minus the wire detail, which we still have a little minute, I'm going to show you. Would then set out to dry, go into the kiln, come out of the bisque, and then it's time for me to do the underglazing. And the underglazing, I like to let my underglazes, and I meant to grab it, so I'm going to grab it really quick. I like to let my underglazes dry in a palette. I have all my colors mixed. Sometimes I even write with Sharpie on the palette what combination of underglazes they are. And then I come in and use them just like watercolor. So that's why this has this sort of washy finish. I'm not applying more than one coat. I'm using them already dry, so it's like a watercolor palette. And I'm applying color, like I said, just like filling in a coloring book.
Someone's asking how you get the underglaze to cover all the grass noodles.
That is so fun. Basically, I just use a big brush and really fill it with my underglaze. But with all of the work that I have currently on Clay Art Center's website for sale through NCECA, I will show you that I'm using colored clay. So this is colored porcelain that I'm using. And by doing that, I do not need to color the noodles, which is a game changer. So I will say painting the noodles, not the easiest thing, but I don't mind it. So in my other work, you can see here, I have another one where the grass, I play with mixing the colors of the colored porcelain to get different gradients of green. And then I'm just having to add clear glaze, which is really nice. So it is tricky. Great question. That's why I sort of try to avoid it in some bodies of work. And then let's do we'll add the wires. And again, if any of you guys during this have any questions, like shout them out. Always happy to answer. So the wire noodles, nichrome high fire wire. It's really fun to work with. And it comes in all different gauges. I really like to work with 17 gauge, it sort of works for me. And I use, let me just get that out of the way. I use a mini bolt cutter to cut it because I found that my jewelry pliers and wire cutters don't always work so well. So this can cut through any gauge. I really like it. And I usually just cut a bunch of lengths. And what I'm doing is normally my noodles have built up pretty substantially. And I'm taking these pieces of wire that I've cut and I'm playing with positioning them on the pot. And I want to be conscious of this because it is a functional object. I don't want to put wires where my fingers and hand are going to be by the handle. So I'm conscious to be sort of thinking about this side of the pot. And I also know that I've trimmed this, but I've consciously left a little bit of extra material down at the foot, knowing that I want to put some wires in, because I don't want to put wires in this and then have it poke through and then have someone drinking coffee and it tinkling out a tiny little hole. We don't want that. So I need to make sure I have some material for me to enter into with my wire. So here's my first wire that I have here. And I just sort of play around with positioning it. And I want to feel that it enters the clay, but I don't want to push it too far in because I don't want it to go through the piece. So I really am just feeling it sort of enter and sit in there, and it kind of stops itself. And I have my first wire. And when I like to work in odd numbers, it's just my thing. So I've like cut 5 pieces of wire that I would then go ahead and enter into the work at different places.
Did you say nichromium wire?
It is nichrome wire, and I can show you. I order it from Jacobs. I don't know if that's backwards for you, but Jacobs Online Biz. It's nichrome 60 wire, and it comes in spools of 30 feet, 50 feet. I really like it. They have all different gauge. He ships everywhere and very quickly, and it's a great material. And I use nichrome wire as opposed to Canthal wire because I like a few things. I like that it has some flexibility after being fired. Like if I wanted to shift one of these noodles a little, I could, or one of these wires a little, I could. But I also like that it turns black in the firing and sort of gets this finish to it that like in certain places isn't there, but certain places is. And I kind of like that wire feel that it gives the piece. It's like another element of another layer to the surface. And
some other questions. One was from somebody saying they missed a step. When do you put on the underglazes to get the rest of the colors on the piece?
After it comes out of the bisque, so that it's just a bisque cup and it's basically like me applying watercolor to the surface, and then the whole thing gets clear glazed and goes back into the kiln.
And then the other question we got was from Lee. What was your inspiration or idea for adding the wires?
So for adding the wires, for me, it's all about adding element into space. Like I'm always looking to engage people further than the form itself. How can I excite the space around the form too? Because a lot of times with objects, there's a weight to them. It's made out of clay. It's a heavy material. So how can I kind of suspend my work into space and even make people engage with it in a different way? Whether that's like oh my God, this is really annoying. Like, why are these balls on this mug like this? And it's like interfering with me. Or is this like something fun and something that you can handle and sort of play with and think about like a toy or something playful and youthful, and maybe you just want to look at it, but like maybe there is something about that added space and that added element of, rather than the flowers just being drawn, now these berries are drawn and then they're here in real life. So there's something, I think I like that back and forth of like flat 3D, flat 3D, like I'm bringing it back and forth, throwing the mug, it's 3-dimensional, drawing a landscape flat, adding the sun and moon to make it 3-dimensional, adding the wires to create space. It's sort of this play back and forth, because I always draw. I love to draw. That's something that's always in my practice. And I think this gives me that room to play. And I'm using the wire almost like a line, and it's like furthering the space of my drawings. Is the long.
Beth, do you have a question? I see your hand raised.
Yeah, feel free to jump in, anyone.
And then
the last thing I was going to do is just show you that I have these little balls that I keep wrapped, these tiny little pieces that I keep wrapped up. They're pretty soft still. And then I just simply place them gently on the wire. And that's how the whole thing evolves. And I make extras so that I can put them so it looks like some of them fell, some of them are on the ground rolling around, sort of add to the story.
So I guess another question is, are these pieces, can you put them in the microwave?
I would probably not put the wire pieces in the microwave, and I would not put them in the dishwasher. They are definitely more sculptural mugs, whereas like the mugs that I make that are like this, do as you will, put it in the microwave, put it in the dishwasher, bang it around. They're pretty hardy. But any of the work, no, I would not recommend doing that.
And then another question is, so you add the watercolor on the bisqueware?
Yes. So it comes out of the bisque, and then I take my palette and some water. I even have like a little eyedropper that Alex Fitzpatrick showed me about that I put in here, and add a little bit of water to it so that I can paint on the surface, and it kind of loosens them up a little bit.
And then somebody else is asking if the wire is glazed.
The wire is not glazed. I have experimented with that a little. I haven't really found it to be so successful. I haven't had much success with that yet. I have used enamel markers to color the wire post-firing for sculptural things, but even that kind of wears over time, so I'm not 100% sold on that. And
then another question about, I know some people have asked about the different tools and wire. Would you be able to share with me afterwards that I can email it to people, information about everything?
Definitely. I can email you a little list of my tools that I love, and Emily can forward it to all of you. Absolutely. And as always, one of the things I always tell students that take a workshop, besides that I so appreciate you guys all being here, that you are now a student of me for life. And always feel free to reach out, questions, email me, send me a message on Instagram. Like, I really love to communicate with my students. I love seeing what students do. I taught a nichrome wire workshop to some students at CSU Pueblo, and one of them just sent me some jewelry she made, and it was amazing. It was so cool to see the whole thing full circle. So love to see what you guys do with anything you learn. Stay in touch.
Thank you everybody for joining us. It's been wonderful to spend your Saturday morning with all of you.
Yes, it really was so much. It was a true pleasure.
Thank you, Zoe.
Thank you.
It was terrific.